Today I'll be showing you how to set up a basic email server for your own domain on Ubuntu server. So what's the advantage to that over signing up with a professional email host? Well, this setup can be done on an existing, already in use server, like your web server, at no additional cost. Also, if you've set up a WordPress site on your server, like what I did in my last two videos, then this will allow WordPress and other applications on your server to send emails. Another advantage is that you have complete control over the server and its configuration. For example, the rules for the spam filter, which I'll set up in my next video, that determine whether an email should be delivered to the inbox or the spam folder. You can tweak those to your liking. Now, a couple of things before we start this video. This video is made with individuals and small businesses in mind. And I'm doing this on the Google Cloud instance that I've set up a WordPress site on in my last two videos. But with that said, let's get into it. All right, so now the first thing you need to do is log into your server. The next thing you want to do, if you haven't already, is set your server's host name to a fully qualified domain name. And in case you don't know, a fully qualified domain name consists of a host name, .domain name, .top level domain. That's the format for a fully qualified domain name. To check what your host name is currently set to, just use the hostname command like this. And as you can see, my server's hostname is www.demo.drewhadentech.com because I'm doing this on the web server that I set up in another video. Now, in this series of videos, I'm just pretending that demo.drewhadentech.com is my root domain name because I'm not buying a second domain just to make a video. I think that's just silly. Now, if it's not set properly, then you can change it with sudo hostname ctl hostname, your fully qualified domain name, for example, www.demo.drewhadentech.com. So now the next step is to install the Postfix mail server. And that's what's going to send and receive incoming and outgoing email. Before you do that, you want to make sure that Postfix is not installed and remove it and all of its configuration files if it is. To do that, just do sudo apt remove --purge postfix. Like, basically, we want to start out with a clean slate. Just one caveat is that if you followed my last tutorial on hardening a WordPress site where I installed and configured mod evasive, that will be removed by this command, so you will need to redo that after you're finished. But now we can install Postfix with sudo apt install postfix, and then we're going to grab another package that we'll need for authentication for our outgoing SMTP server, and that is libsassel 2-modules. So install those two packages, hit yes to install, and then it should ask you for a mail configuration type. If you don't see this, then uninstall Postfix and reinstall it. But we're going to go with internet site. Now your system mail name should be your root domain, like this. This, not your fully qualified domain. In my example, I'm pretending that demo.drewhadentech.com is my root domain. So this server will be receiving emails and sending emails for demo.drewhadentech.com, but not drewhadentech.com, if that makes sense. Do not put a www or mail here, since otherwise your server will be sending and receiving mail for www.yourdomain.com, but not yourdomain.com. All right, so now we move on to the next step where we open ports for our firewall. If you're with Google Cloud, then you do that from your Google Cloud console by going to VPC Network, Firewall, then click Create Firewall Rule. And then you're going to have to give it a name. I'll just call it mail-demo. And then network should be whatever VPC network your instance is in. By default, it's just in the default network. Priority, you can leave the same. Direction of traffic, ingress, action on match, allow. And then you're going to want to specify target tags. Now, to view or create the tags for your instance, just go to the compute engine and then VM instances, and then click on your instance to get its details, and then scroll down until you see network tags. And then these are the tags that your instance is assigned. If you've allowed HTTP and HTTPS traffic, then by default, it'll have the tags HTTP server and HTTPS server. You can edit your tags by clicking this edit button, then scroll down to network tags, and then you can add network tags here. And then don't forget to save your changes. Once you've done that, just put at least one of its tags here. So I will do HTTP-server, since I'm targeting my web server. And then under source filter, you're going to select IPv4 ranges, which should already be selected. Note that we're not worrying about IPv6 in this video or this series because Google Cloud instances don't have IPv6 addresses by default. But for source IPv4 ranges, you're going to put 0.0.0.0/0 to open these ports to the whole internet. Then come down to protocols and ports, and then select specified protocols and ports. Do not just allow all. You don't want to just implicitly open up all your ports to the entire internet. So then you're going to select TCP. And the ports you're going to want to open are 25 for your incoming mail, and then 587 for your outgoing SMTP server, and then 143 and 993 for your IMAP server, which is what you're going to use to access your email. And then note that your port numbers should be separated by commas, and then click create. There we go. Now those ports are open. Now, if you're paying attention, you might notice SMTP port 25 is disallowed in this project. Now, Google Cloud, like many other VPS providers and internet service providers, block port 25 outbound, so your instances can't send email directly to other SMTP servers. Port 25 inbound is still allowed though, provided you've opened it up in your firewall, so your instances can still at least receive email. To get around this, I'm going to be configuring an SMTP relay to bypass that. So there's a lot that I'm actually going to be omitting from this video that would normally be required for a server that sends email directly to other servers. If your VPS provider or ISP allows outbound 25 and you want to set up your server to directly send emails to other SMTP servers, check out the Linux Babes tutorial on this. This guide is very comprehensive. I've even used it myself to set up my own email server on Ubuntu. But anyway, the next step is going to be to set up DNS records by going into your domain registrar. And then we're going to have to create an MX record. Now, let me show you how I have this set up for my actual production server. Your MX record should be at your root domain, because you're receiving email destined for your root domain. And mail server should be your fully qualified domain name for your mail server. Now for my demo, I'm going to create a new MX record under my demo subdomain. And then my fully qualified domain name is again www.demo.druadentech.com. TTL you can leave the same, and priority is 0. Then click save. Now, if you haven't already, then of course you need to set up an A record pointing to your mail server. But now the next step is to set up a PTR record resolving your instance's IP address to your fully qualified domain name. Now, here's the thing about PTR, is that it isn't managed by your domain registrar. It's managed by your VPS provider. Because, after all, you don't get an IP address from your domain registrar, you get an IP address from your VPS provider. So now let me show you how to set that up with Google Cloud. So come back into your Google Cloud console, go to Compute Engine, VM Instances, then click on your instance, then click Edit, and then scroll down to Network Interfaces, click on your network interface, and then scroll down to Public DNS PTR record, enable it, then type your fully qualified domain name for your mail server. Now, if you get an error doing that, then what you have to do is go into Search Console by going to search.google.com/search-console, and then type in your root domain here on the left pane, like so, then click Continue, and then it'll walk you through how to go through the process for verifying your domain ownership. But once you've done that, then you should be able to set your PTR record. To test that, just grab your instance's public IP, and then just go into a Linux terminal or a Windows command prompt, and then type ns lookup, your external IP, and then that should resolve to your fully qualified domain name. And once you've done that, you can continue to the next step. The next step is to sign up with an email relay and then configure it in your Postfix configuration. For this video, I'm going to be using Brevo, which allows for sending up to 300 emails a day for free, which is plenty for individuals and small businesses. All you have to do is just make an account. Pardon me while I do that. All right, and then once you get to this screen where you choose a plan, we're going to go with the free plan, which allows us to send up to 300 emails per day. All right, so now the next step is to go up to your account, then click Senders, Domains, and Dedicated IPs. Then click Domains, and then we're going to add a domain, and then type in your root domain name. And then it'll walk you through how to authenticate your domain. Depending on your registrar, you may be able to authenticate the domain automatically, which would be the simplest way. So I'm going to do that. If you're with Cloudflare, then it'll just get you to sign into your Cloudflare account. And then Brevo will just request a one-time authorization to add these records. This TXT record verifies your domain ownership with Brevo. And then these CNAME records are for DKIM validation. Now, DKIM is a mechanism that allows outgoing SMTP servers or relays to sign outgoing emails with a cryptographic signature, which then incoming SMTP servers can validate to verify that an email did genuinely originate from the domain that it claims to have originated from. And then you'll also see another TXT record, and that's for configuring DMARC, which is another component that's essential for email deliverability. Now, it's actually already set up on my root domain, so that's why you don't see it in this video, but these are required by Gmail and Outlook for email deliverability. If you don't have this set up, then Gmail and Outlook will actually put your emails in the spam folder, or worse, not deliver them at all. So then you're going to click Authorize to add these records, and then go back to your domain listing, and now it shows domain status is authenticated. I just like to check the configuration, and like that, sometimes it doesn't validate it properly. So let's just go add the missing DNS records again. We're just going to authorize it again, and then check it again. And now that should validate. Sometimes with this, Brevo can be a little hit and miss, which is why I like to check the configuration just to make sure it got set up properly. But once all the records validate, then you can come to senders, and then you're going to add a sender. And then your from name, you could just put in whatever name you want here. And then your email address should be whatever name you're going to give to your email account that you use for sending and receiving email. I'm going to use info as its name. Neither need to exist just yet. And then at your domain, demo.dredentech.com in my example, and then add the sender. And then once you add that sender, it should show as verified, and that DKIM and DMARC are configured. And then you can go ahead and delete the default sender that it adds, which is just the email address that you use to create your account. So now to configure your Postfix to use Brevo as the relay for outgoing emails, just go to this tab on the left, click on transactional, and then click on real time under email. And then it'll bring you to this screen where it'll show you your configuration details for Brevo. All you have to do here is just click this configuration example with Postfix, copy all this, then come back to your server, then do sudo nano /etc/postfix/main.cf, and then come down here to relay host, delete everything that is on that line, and then paste in that configuration from Brevo. And you might want to remove this extra spacing. And by the way, I'm gonna delete this account after I'm done with this video. So don't bother trying to use this in your Postfix configuration. But anyway, once you're done, you're going to hit Control-X, Y, and then Enter, and then restart Postfix for the changes to take effect with sudo systemctl restart Postfix. And now we can send a test email with echo, double quotes, put whatever you want here, like test email, and then pipe, and then send mail. Any email address outside your domain. I'm going to be sending it to my main web server, and then hit enter, and then you should get an email from your username at your domain, and then that shows that it's working. So then once you've done that, come back to Brevo, then click Next, and now you'll see that these logs show up. And then you just hit It Works, and then it'll show you your last email sent again on this page. And by the way, if you want to check your usage, just click on Usage and Plan, and then that'll show you how many emails you have left for today. Okay, so now we're done with Brevo. So now we can close out of that. Now we're going to do some additional configuration with Postfix to make this a fully functional email server. First of all, we're going to do sudo nano /etc/postfix/master.cf. And by the way, I'll have all these commands in the description. And now you're going to come down to submission inet n, this line, uncomment that. Then uncomment syslog name equals postfix/submission. Basically what we're doing is enabling the Postfix submission service for our outgoing SMTP server. Then uncomment SMTPD TLS security level equals encrypt. And then SMTPD SASL auth enable equals yes. Then uncomment SMTPD relay restrictions. Then add permit _ SASL _ authenticated, comma, reject. Then uncomment SMTPD recipient restrictions. Then right after the equal sign, add permit _ my networks, comma. Then you're going to create a new line after that, double space dash O SMTP D underscore Sazzle underscore type equals Dovecot, which is what we're going to be using for our IMAP server, and then make a new line after that, double space dash O SMTPD underscore Sazzle underscore path equals private / auth. And then your configuration should look something like this. Then hit Control X, Y, and then enter to save the file. Now we're going to do sudo nano /etc /postfix /main.cf to configure our SSL certificate. So come down to TLS parameters and then specify your TLS certificate file, which we've obtained in my video where I set this up as a web server. It'll be under /etc /let's encrypt /live /your domain /full chain.pem, and then come down to SMTP DTLS key file, which will be under /etc /let's encrypt /live /your domain /privkey.pem. And by the way, if you're doing this on a standalone server, to obtain an SSL certificate from Let's Encrypt, just head over to certbot.eff.org, scroll down to my HTTP website is running, then select Other on Linux with snap in brackets, since we're doing this on Ubuntu. And then just follow the instructions here. You're going to use the sudo certbot cert only -- standalone option. But anyway, now we're going to come back here, go down to this blank line, and then type SMTPD underscore TLS underscore log level equals 1. Then come down to these two blank lines, then paste in these lines that I'll have in the description and remove the extra spacing. Basically, what these do is disable older, less secure SSL and TLS protocols, and then force email clients to use at least TLS 1.2. Okay, so now come down to my host name, and then make sure that's set to the fully qualified domain name for your mail server, and then come down to the bottom of the file, and then you're going to create a new line that says message underscore size underscore limit, and then basically this configures our size limit on incoming emails. By default, it's 10 megabytes, which I think it's a little bit small. I like to bump this up to 25 megabytes, which is 26,214,400 bytes. Like, you specify this in bytes here. Do not set this to unlimited, because what this does is it prevents large, oversized emails from wasting your resources and eating up your storage very quickly. Okay, and then once you're done here, just hit Control X, Y, and then enter to save the file. And now the next step is to create a second non-administrative user account for sending and receiving email. Like, this is the name that's going to show to the left of the @ symbol, and also the name that you're going to use to log in with your email client. To do that, do sudo add user, your name of choice. I'm going to call it info, and then pick a password, and then confirm it. You can leave all these values blank. Okay, and now you're going to do sudo nano /etc /aliases is to configure an alias for the postmaster address, which is required for all email servers. And this should point to the email account for the mail server administrator. By default, it points to the root user. However, we don't use the root user, so we're going to change this to our own non-administrative email account, in our case, info. Now you can specify any account here as long as it can receive email. But anyway, once you're done with that, just Control X, Y, and then enter to save the file. And then do sudo new aliases is to rebuild the aliases table. And now we get to the part where we install and configure our IMAP server. We're going to be using Dovecot as our IMAP server. We can install it with sudo apt install dovecot-core dovecot-imapd dovecot-lmtpd. Then hit enter. Note that we're not going to be worrying about POP3 in this video, since that's kind of a legacy protocol at this point. At least I don't really see it used very much these days. But anyway, you're going to hit yes to install that. Okay, so now we're going to configure Dovecot. First of all, we're going to do sudo nano/etc/dovecot/dovecot.conf, and then come down here under enable installed protocols, and then you're going to add a line that says protocols equals IMAP for accessing our email, and then LMTP, which will allow Postfix to deliver emails to Dovecot. Then hit Control X, Y, and then enter to save the file. And then do sudo nano/etc/dovecot/10-mail.conf. And then you're going to come down to mail location. Now, by default, this is configured to save emails in mbox format, which basically means it's saving all emails in one single file. However, this is prone to corruption, so you'll want to use maildir instead. So delete everything that is in mail location, then type maildir:\maildir, exactly like that. And then what this will do is this will tell Dovecot to save messages in maildir format, which puts each individual email message in its own file. So much less prone to corruption. Even if one email is corrupted, then it doesn't mess with the entire mailbox. And then this tells Dovecot to store the mailbox in the maildir directory under each user's home directory. Then hit Control X, Y, and then enter to save. And then do sudo nano/etc/dovecot/10-master.conf, and then come down to service LMTP, and then replace Unix listener LMTP with Unix listener /var/spool/private/dovecot-lmtp, and then uncomment the mode line, and then replace it with mode equals 0600. And then you're going to add a couple lines. User equals Postfix, and group equals Postfix. Now come down to service auth, and then replace Unix listener auth-userdb with /var/spool/postfix/private/auth, and then uncomment the mode, user, and group lines. Replace mode equals 0666 with mode equals 0660, and then user equals postfix, and group equals postfix. Then hit Control X, then Y, then Enter to save and close the file. And now we're going to configure postfix to pass incoming emails to Dovecot to be stored in the mailbox by doing sudo nano /etc/postfix/main.cf. And then you're going to create a couple new lines at the bottom of the file. Mailbox underscore transport equals LMTP colon Unix colon private / Dovecot -LMTP to tell postfix to pass incoming messages to Dovecot. And then SMTP UTF-8-enable equals no to disable the SMTP UTF-8 extension, which Dovecot does not support. Then hit Control X, then Y, then Enter to save and close the file. And now we're going to configure authentication in Dovecot with sudo nano /etc/Dovecot /conf.d/10-auth.conf, and then come down to disable plain text auth and uncomment that line to enforce secure authentication, because we do not want to send passwords over the internet in plain text. That's a terrible idea in 2025. Then come down to auth username format, uncomment that line, and then replace %lu with %n, because we're just using Unix user accounts. So this tells it to just look for the username, because by default it'll look for the username at your domain name, which users by that name don't exist, which will cause authentication to fail. But then you're going to hit Control X, Y, and then Enter to save and close the file. And now we're going to configure SSL in Dovecot by doing sudo nano /etc/Dovecot /conf.d/10-ssl.conf. Then come down to SSL equals yes, and then change this to SSL equals required, and then come down to SSL cert, and then replace this with /etc/let's encrypt /live/your domain /full-chain.pem. Then come down to SSL key and replace that with /etc/let's encrypt /live/your domain /privkey.pem. And by the way, the two angled brackets at the beginning of directories under SSL cert and SSL key do matter. Don't delete them. They do have to be there. Then come down to SSL min protocol, and then uncomment this line to enforce at least TLS 1.2. Then come down to SSL prefer server ciphers, uncomment this line, and then change this to yes to prefer the server's order of ciphers over the client, because we want to dictate our ciphers on the server side, not on the client side. And then hit Control X, Y, and then Enter to save the file. Now what we have to do is disable the FIPS provider in the OpenSSL configuration, because it doesn't play nicely with Dovecot. To do that, do sudo nano /etc/ssl /openssl.cnf, not .conf, and then you should get this file. Basically, if you see a blank file, you've typed it in wrong. But anyway, assuming that you've got to the right file, come down to OpenSSL init, and then comment out the providers equals provider sect line, and then hit Control-X, Y, and then enter to save the file. And now what we've got to do is configure Dovecot to automatically create certain mailboxes, like our trash, drafts, sent, and other folders, by doing sudo nano /etc/dovecot /conf.d/15-mailboxes.conf. These, and then here you can see the special use definitions that Dovecot has. And if you scroll down, you'll see some default mailboxes that Dovecot has configured, albeit not auto-created by default. To have a mailbox auto-created, just within a particular mailbox, curly braces, just make a new line that says auto equals create, for example, in the drafts folder, and then just repeat that for any mailbox that you want to auto-create, like our junk, our trash, and then you will also want to auto-create a sent folder. If you want to call it sent messages, then you can put auto equals create in this one. Note that you should only have one sent folder. But anyway, I'm going to just call my sent folder sent. So I'm going to put my auto equals create line in this one. Then these are other mailbox definitions which you may want. You can get those by uncommenting these lines. I'm not going to create those, but one mailbox you may want to create that isn't predefined is an archive folder. So let's go create that. We're going to add a new line after these. Mailbox archive. That's going to be the name of our mailbox. And then we're going to put curly braces here, like so. Just pro tip, anytime you open a curly brace, immediately close it off so that you don't forget to do it. Because if you forget to close off a curly brace, then you'll run into all sorts of hard to pin down errors. But anyway, now you're going to type special underscore use equals /archive to mark it as an archive folder. And then auto equals create. And then this will auto create these mailboxes for new users that log in to Dovecot for the first time. And by the way, the inbox is always auto created. But anyway, just hit Control-X, then Y, and then enter to save and close the file. And now the very, very last thing we're going to do before we apply our changes is add the Dovecot user to the mail group by doing sudo add user Dovecot mail. Okay, and now we can apply our changes to our Postfix and Dovecot configurations by doing sudo systemctl restart postfix Dovecot. Okay, and now we have a fully functional mail server. Now the next step comes the fun one, configuring our email server in our email clients. So now, of course, this is something that's going to look different for every email client, but I'm just going to give you a general idea of what your configuration should be. So for your outgoing SMTP server, your server name should be the fully qualified domain name for your mail server. Port is 587. Connection security will be start TLS. Don't select none here. Authentication method is just a normal password. And your username is the username that you set up for your non-administrative account that you're using to send and receive email. And the password will be the password that you've set up for that account. And then for your IMAP server, server name, username, and password are the same thing. Port is 993. Connection security is SSL/TLS. And then authentication method is just normal password. But But anyway, once we've got that configured, we should see our mailboxes here. Note that in Thunderbird, you will need to subscribe to your mailboxes for it to show them. They do exist, assuming that you've configured your Dovecot mailbox auto creation correctly. Thunderbird just doesn't show them by default. But anyway, now we're going to go send a test email from our server. I'm going to send an email to my main server with a subject test. This is a test email. And then send that. And then we should see it in our sent folder. And if I come to my main server, yes, I did receive that. So now let's try replying to that from our other email. This is a test reply. Go ahead and send that. And then we should get a reply back on our server that we've just set up. Stay tuned for my next video where I show you how to set up a spam filter as well as verification for incoming emails on your server. In the meantime, be sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, comment, share with your friends, all that good stuff, and see you next time.